is globally and across the states. And we know your time is extremely precious as brands who are running your businesses every day, and especially as we enter a very peak period that is Q4. So we want to get started and make sure you all feel equipped to be able to level up on your SEO, a very in-demand topic across the brand community on Faire. And we're really excited to bring on some experts to make you feel more informed and more excited about what you can do to drive success there. So let's do a quick introduction. I'm Sarah. I am on the customer marketing team here at Faire, specifically focused on the brand community, really helping to make sure that you all feel empowered and enabled to have the tools and strategies you need to feel successful and feel that you have the ability to grow on Faire in a meaningful way. And I'm joined here today by Zach Kadish, who is our SEO lead at Faire, who is a true expert in the space and has been doing this a long time before joining Faire. And I'm excited to have him share a lot of his wisdom. And then lastly, we have the lovely Kelly Carlson, who is joining us as the wholesale manager from TELETIES, who their time on Faire has been extraordinary and they've seen tremendous growth and have done a lot of investment in SEO. So she'll be sharing some of her own experiences across that space. So how our webinars work, a couple things to just take note of. One, we'll absolutely be recording this session and sending it out as a follow-up email after the actual webinar itself. So look out in your inboxes for those details and more resources that we'll mention today. Secondly, we are about to disable the chat so that we can focus on gathering all of your questions in the Q&A space, which you'll find at the bottom of the screen of your Zoom screen. You all have sent hundreds and hundreds of questions already, and we're really excited to be able to take a lot of that and put that into the content you'll see in front of you today. So if you have any lingering questions at the end of the session, we'll also have a feedback survey that you can go ahead and submit any questions that we'll have eyes on at the end. And what we'll cover, so first we'll tackle SEO Foundations, so truly the nuts and bolts of everything you need to know for the foundations of SEO. So Zach will take you through that. And then we'll dive into optimization tactics, so actionable ways that you can take these nuggets of wisdom from Zach and in general across Faire and apply them to your own shop page and your products. And then thirdly, we'll speak with Kelly and get a little bit more about her direct experience and her team's experience working with SEO and tips and tricks that she's used to gain visibility on the platform. And lastly, we'll round out with a few other FAQs that we know you all are curious about and one last feedback survey to make sure we're capturing all of your lovely feedback before we close out. And just as a quick refresh, we have a lot of foundational resources for you that are available any time of day without having to be at a webinar. And I just want to call out a few of those. The first is our Faire blog for selling, which you can find directly on the Faire website. And that has lots of trend insights. So we make sure to cover that on a monthly and quarterly basis, in addition to how-tos and educational resources to help better your shop performance. We also have the YouTube channel, and we also have our Instagram. So I recommend taking a follow and joining the brand broadcast channel, which is specifically anchored toward brand education and news related to you. And then the last two things I'll mention, one is the brand community that we have on Facebook. So our Faire Community Forum, which we'll be sure to send you the link for that for this webinar, has lots of launch updates. Brands are sharing questions, sharing insights and learnings and best practices. And then lastly, at the end of every month on the last Wednesday, we are sending through our marketing channel the Goods newsletter, which is full of trending keywords, other insights and articles, and also some best practices from some of our brands. So wanted to make sure you all feel prepared before we dive in. I'll hand it over to Zach.
Awesome. Thanks, Sarah. Wow, what a crowd. I'm excited to talk a little bit more around SEO Foundations. I've been doing SEO for, a large part of my career, and I'm really excited to not only help Faire with their visibility, but also help all brands like you all to really increase your visibility to make sure that the products you're selling can be found by the people who actually want them. So during today's presentation, we're going to cover a lot of specifics around SEO. But before, let's kind of talk a little bit more around why brands actually choose Faire. There's a lot of specific reasons. One of it could be the unparalleled reach that we offer as a platform. We have the largest network of retailers to make sure that we're connecting you with the right buyers. It could also be due to just the all-in-one wholesale platform that we offer to really strengthen your relationship in one direct place to make sure that you have the best experience across the board. And there's also a lot of reasons that, retailers convert with us because of the benefits that we have to make it, less risky or lower costs and to make sure that they love the products that you offer. But really during today's presentation, we're going to really be focusing on the unparalleled reach area because we want to make sure that the products you have are being found by as many people as possible. Just as Sarah mentioned, if there's any questions as we go through this in terms of like SEO and visibility, feel free to put it in the Q&A. But a lot of these more tactical things we'll actually cover during the live presentation as well. So before we get into like actually how to do this and the specifics, let's kind of start from the basics. Like, what is SEO? And it really stands for search engine optimization. And the goal of this is it's the process of appearing higher on search engines, whether that's Google or Faire. But really the part of this that I love is anyone can technically show up higher as long as you're showing the most relevant information. So the goal of what we're doing within SEO is to make sure that a user who's searching for something that you have or that you sell, and your product shows up high based off of the relevancy of what you're adding to your content. And as you probably have all seen in your day-to-day, the landscape of search has started to drastically shift and drastically change. Search visibility in itself is absolutely shifting into different areas. And now visibility really does depend where you show up across all of these different searchable surfaces that we'll talk about in a little. But before we kind of get into some of the nuts and bolts of this, I'm just kind of curious to hear from the audience, like, where are you going today to find out what you need? So we'll have a poll that's popping up any second now. Would love for you to just kind of chime in on different areas because, I personally know that depending on what I'm doing, I kind of go to different places. Maybe if I'm finding a restaurant for me and my wife to go to, I go to TikTok. Or if I'm planning a trip, maybe I'll go to Instagram. But sometimes then I'll still go back to Google to kind of figure this out. But I'm just kind of curious to like better learn where all you kind of start your journey. So we'll have an answer coming up any second now. I'm just kind of curious to kind of see some differences here. And we'll have the results populating any second now. Okay, wow. So it's impressive that Google still has, the kind of the monopoly here in terms of like 86%, which is really awesome to see. But as you can start to see that, ChatGPT or AI tools that, it seems like people are kind of going to a mix of all of these. And that's really what this presentation is going to cover, because what we're starting to notice within the landscape is that search is becoming wherever a search bar is. A lot of people, including myself, who's been in SEO for 10 years, I go to different places to start my search journey. Sometimes I'm going to Google, sometimes I'm going to ChatGPT, sometimes I'm going back to Google, but search is now evolving. And that also does now include Faire, because Faire in itself is a search engine, and we do have an algorithm that really helps understand what your products are to surface those relevant results to our buyers to make sure that what they're looking for, they can easily find. So with all that in mind, we really want to make sure that you're thinking about Faire in terms of your optimization strategy to make sure that when we actually upload content or upload products, we're doing it in a relevant way. And that's really what this presentation is going to be geared towards. So let's dive a little bit deeper now. And, we're going to cover a lot of these specifics in more depth during the presentation today. But from a high level, let's just kind of talk about how the algorithm works for Faire. The goal of Faire is to really connect buyers with products that are most likely to convert. And the main way that we are doing that is by understanding the content within your product listings. Well, we might refer to those as PDPs or, product pages. That's really the products that you're uploading to Faire. The content within those products is absolutely one of the biggest factors that we look at. Some other factors that, we kind of, well, we're not going to talk about every specific factor today, more of the ones specifically around SEO and the ones that you can directly control within your content. But some other factors that we should be, taking into consideration are like your profile completeness. Like when you're uploading your brand page and your about us and like that shipping details and that branding story, that does matter in terms of understanding your values and, what you kind of offer. But really what we're going to focus on in a lot more depth today is the product description, the product titles, some of those content elements that you can really add more like specific keywords and more relevancy around what you do. It's also important to note that the traffic off of Faire, like pointing to Faire, like where your Faire Direct links come into play, that's actually really important because if more users are clicking on your Faire Direct links, whether it's on your DTC site or on your social channels, that's a signal to Faire like, hey, people outside of Faire are really interested in this, and it's sending traffic directly to Faire. So that's really important in terms of engagement off of Faire as well. Then there's other aspects, like seller performance, such as like, are you fulfilling your products on time? Or like, do you have a low return rate? Are you getting good reviews after, like retailers purchase your products? Those are other aspects that can indirectly impact your rankings within the algorithm too. And then we'll also talk a little bit more in depth today around category accuracy in terms of the value tags that you add and where you're putting your specific products. And then also the image quality and consistency of what we're seeing. As an e-com site, it's really important to make sure that you have videos, you have photos, and they're very clear for users. But again, we're going to talk about a lot of these in a little bit more depth right now. But before we do that, I just want to kind of set the stage and kind of break down the differences between like retail SEO and Faire SEO as a wholesale marketplace. So when you think about retail SEO, think about like your own website, if you do have one. That's really more geared towards, for the most part, towards like D2C shoppers who are like purchasing one or two or like maybe sometimes 3 units or just like a single unit by itself. While Faire SEO is really geared towards wholesale and geared towards people who are signing up, retailers specifically like B2B, who are trying to then purchase in bulk and then repeat that order over time for their store. So when you're thinking about retail SEO, you would likely control majority of the site. It's your own site, so you have all these aspects that you can control. But on Faire, within your profile, you're really only controlling like your own branded profile and then the PDPs or the product listings that you're uploading to the site as well. In terms of where you show up for your D2C site, it's primarily on Google, on the organic listings, and then also likely sometimes maybe within like Google Shopping, or if someone searches your brand directly on Google. But within Faire, primarily where you're showing up is within Faire's internal search algorithm and internal site search. But you also have the benefit of potentially showing up within Google too. That's a big part of how people sometimes sign up and find products is directly on Google. So you get that added bonus here. And in terms of how visibility works, primarily within retail SEO, you're showing up on the search engine result page on the open web. While in Faire, you're showing up both on the web in terms of Google or other search engines, and then also within Faire's ranking algorithm. So you just wanted to kind of break down those differences. And the good news here is, I just covered a lot around some of the differences, but the best practices across the board are going to translate. So really the best practices across SEO, even across these new AI search engines that people are starting to like start their journey in, the SEO best practices translate across all of these channels. So if you're doing something that you feel is successful on your D2C site, you could definitely implement a lot of those best practices on Faire as well. Now let's cover a little bit more around some of these specific tactics to optimize your listings and optimize your site directly on Faire to make sure that you show up for the retailers that matter. So one quick poll before we jump into that. I'm just kind of curious to better learn from the large audience that we have today. How often are you updating your catalog? And when we say update, we also this could be like making changes to specific products that you have. It doesn't mean like uploading new products all the time. It could be just like making direct changes to the products that you already have directly on Faire. Because some of the things that we will cover later on is how updating sometimes things for seasonal aspects or just updating things in the future, if you're not noticing like high performance, does matter. So just curious before we kind of talk through some of those specifics to kind of see what people are doing today. And if you're not doing that today, that's totally fine. That's what we're here for. Cool, we'll have results coming in any second now, and we can kind of see the breakdown across different brands. Okay, so we have definitely a big mix where people sometimes do it on a more monthly or quarterly basis, sometimes not at all, sometimes daily, which is pretty cool, and sometimes more on an annual basis. But it really seems like a mix between quarterly and monthly is like the highest amount, which is definitely good to see. Cool. Appreciate everyone filling out those polls. So now let's talk a little bit more around things that you actually can control from a technical aspect in terms of how your site and your pages are built. Faire is going to control most of those outputs. When we talk about like technical solutions and how we're helping make your pages accessible, really think about it from, we want to make sure that when a customer lands on your product listing or lands on your branded page, it's fast, it's a good experience, whether they're on desktop or on mobile, and that everything on your site is very searchable and easy for them to see. We're going to handle all that heavy lifting. But the things that you do control are your product titles, your descriptions, your images, your attributes, and your tags and categories. So let's talk about those in a little bit more depth, and we'll dive deeper into each of these during the session today. But the main takeaway from all of this is your product titles is the #1 SEO signal on Faire, on Google, that you should really be focusing on. So if there's like one thing to really remember from today's presentation is to make sure that you're updating your product titles for relevancy. And we'll talk in a lot depth about this. The second aspect of this is descriptions. That's really helpful for both your search and for user conversions. In terms of images, this is really helpful for like helping a user like ourselves like understand like what kind of products do you have, how do they look, how are they styled, and this is also really helpful for filtering on our site. And then as well for attributes and details, this is also really helpful for the algorithms to better understand like what truly is your product about, and really helpful when a user filters down further to make sure that we're showing the right things to them. Same thing with tags and categories. We want to make sure that your products are hosted in the right place so they're visible to users who really care about them. So I'm going to be talking a lot about like keywords during today's presentation. If you're not familiar with what a keyword is, it's basically just a specific word or phrase that people are looking for and typing in when they're looking for like information or products or services. To me, they're like the bread and butter of SEO. You know, they're the true foundation of what we do here because it's really what's connecting buyers to what they're actually searching for. I might also mention during today's presentation like longer tail keywords. That's basically just like the more and more phrases you go. So typically we like talk about head keywords, which is like one word. Longer tail keywords is like 3 to 4 words. So the longer tail that you are using within your product titles, usually the more accurate they are, usually the higher conversion rate we see, because buyers today type very stream of consciousness. You know, they type very long tail because they know what they want. So that's really what we want to make sure that you're doing within your titles and within your descriptions. But like, where can you get these keywords? You know, one, you could get them from our Faire trended content. So, you know, sign up for the monthly newsletter if you haven't already and check out our blog. We kind of always report out on like trending searches that people are seeing and that we're seeing from our proprietary data within Faire. There's also like free and paid keyword tools out there from an SEO perspective that you could use to just match the customer's voice. Also within your products section within Faire, you can also kind of better understand like what products are doing really well. And maybe you can kind of double down on some of the things that you've done there, some of the keywords, some of the attributes that you've done there, and kind of, you know, rinse and repeat that for maybe some of your underperforming products. That's really where updating your catalog comes into play. But you could also like just think like a buyer. I always say, take a step back from your product, take a step back from your company. If I was a consumer, what would I search for? That's really a good way to kind of start thinking like a buyer and then updating your products, your descriptions to match that intent. And there's also, you know, you could get inspired. You could look at what other people are doing on Faire or on Google and figuring out, hey, does that resonate with my products? Is that something I should also be doing as well? So now let's dive a little bit more into the details around this. But our main recommendation across all of this is you want to be consistent with the details. You want to make sure that whatever you do within your product descriptions and your product detail pages is that you're consistent and you're relevant within this information. That's the #1 thing to really think about is you want to make sure that you're being relevant to your users. So now let's dive a little bit deeper into product titles. Again, this is the most important ranking factor, both on Faire and on Google search. What we recommend is to be within around 35 to 60 characters. That way, if you're ever searching on Faire or you're ever searching on Google, if you ever see something get cut off, it's probably a little too long. And if it's a little too short, you're not really taking the most value out of what you could be doing within that space. But this is where we want you to be a little bit more relevant and descriptive. You know, we don't want you to just say in this example, the glow. That doesn't really represent anything to the algorithm and anything to, the user. You want to include product types or descriptions or like the scent and the size and the function of what it does. So, if I'm a user and I'm looking for hydrating everyday face moisturizer, if I'm not actually saying that within the title and within the description, then the algorithm doesn't know it and the user won't know it really as well. And again, we don't want to compromise your brand tone and your voice. We want you to find a balance there. So if your product's called the Glow in this instance, you can still use that product name, but just try to be a little bit more descriptive in other areas so that you're really capturing on those relevant keywords. So again, in this case, we want you to try to avoid only using like vague titles or brand names. And like, we want you to also include relevant information within that title as well, because that's a really great way to show up and become a little bit more relevant around what's happening. So then this area is called the meta description. This is actually only showing up on Google. We're going to talk a little bit around how this is influenced from your product description in the next slide. But when you think about the meta description, the reason we care about this is because we are starting to notice that a large amount of sometimes users and new retailers come in directly from Google. And one of the ways that this could help increase your rankings is by having a relevant meta description. So if you've ever been on Google and you see like, the little blurb of text below the blue link, that's what a meta description is. Sometimes that might actually cause you to click on the page because it's like matching exactly what you searched. What Google does, it's this for specifically on Faire, is it's taking your meta description directly from your product description, and it's taking usually the first 150 and 160 characters. So what we recommend within your product description is to lead with the value there. That way you offer the best chance to show up with a relevant meta description on Google. Google sometimes has a mind of its own and sometimes will just create different meta descriptions from the content on your site. So we do recommend to try to use the most relevant information in the beginning to give you the best chance of having the most relevant meta description on Google. So what we really mean by this, and we'll elaborate a little further in the next slide within your product description, but we want you to start your product description with a benefits-led summary. We want you to use some of those relevant keywords in the beginning of this area that, this can typically match the title of your product, or it could lead with a little bit more value around your product. So try to keep the first area of your product description around 160 characters. We'll talk a little bit more around how you can go a little bit deeper after that, but that's what you want to kind of lead with in this case, so that a user coming from Google knows exactly what they're looking for. And the reason we want to kind of elaborate here is because the product description can really be a lot longer in this case. You have a lot more character limits, and we recommend that you do fill this out with as much information as possible, because that's really how Faire's algorithm and Google's algorithm understand what your product is. I always say if you don't talk like a user, if you don't have the content on your site, the algorithm's not going to know what this is. It can't read our minds. So even though we feel we have the best products, if we're not actually, updating this information with relevant content on our page, we're not going to really understand what it is. So within your product description, add the use case, add ingredients, add the benefits, add who we're targeting in this case. And, you could add specific use cases like, hey, this could be good for self-care or daily skincare or your spa retail. And, you could also use bullets to like make it more skimmable or make it just helpful to easily understand benefits. And also think like a user, like use natural keyword language, be very like using the customer's voice is a really good way to help make sure that your products show up. So take this example before, right here. It's a pretty good description. It's talking about wooden salad spoons and how it has a great natural finish. But in this next version, we just break it down a little bit more in depth. We're talking about measurements. We're talking about who it's good for. We're talking about where it's handmade and other like specific information. So again, we're just trying to elaborate a little bit further on what this product is so that if users are looking for, eco-conscious wooden handles, they can easily find this here. Now we're going to talk a little bit around imagery. I mean, think about it from your own experience. If you're shopping for something and it might not have the best or the most clear image, it's hard for you to imagine like, how would this look on me, or how would this look in my kitchen, or how would this look in my store? So think like a retailer. Like they want to make sure that they're purchasing good products for their buyers. So really try to include high quality visuals, because this actually, one, does help with better search placement. It definitely helps with conversions. And we're also starting to notice that the products with really good images not only show up higher on Faire, but also show up higher on Google as well, because it's just better understanding of what this product is. So we recommend you add at least 3 images to your site, to your product description pages, excuse me. And you could add different ones here. You could have one with a white background. You could have one more lifestyle or texture based. You could have some close-up images here. We do also recommend that you try to add alt text. Basically, this is just a key description of what the image is. So, in this image here, you could just say, like hot garlic XYZ. It could basically just be what your title of the product is. But the point of doing this is because Google actually, and Faire, algorithms can't actually see what images are unless you're adding that alt text. So it is important to make sure that you're adding alt text to these images if you do have them. So it's just very clear and a good description of what this, specific product actually is. And, if you have a demo, if you have an unboxing, you have a brand story, feel free to add it. It's just a good way for a user to better understand who you are and why they should purchase from you. But the point of this is really bringing the size of the product and the texture to life to really help elaborate further on why your product's good. Now we'll talk a little bit around product details and attributes. So, we do recommend that you add a lot of product details and attributes, but only if they're relevant. You don't want to just stuff every attribute available here. Like, that's not the right solution. You want to make sure that they are accurate for what your product does. And the reason for that is it's a good chance that you'll be filtered better and you'll have more relevancy within our results if you're adding relevant things here based off of what users are searching for. And if you don't add these relevant attributes and details, you're not as likely to show up for longer tail searches. We're starting to notice that retailers are searching very long tail in the search bar on Faire directly because they know exactly what they want or they're looking for inspiration. So try to use more like shopper friendly language within your details here. And you can also fill out areas for like scent, use case, size, material, everything that's relevant. Make sure that it's on the page. This can also be a good way if you're trying to think about like earlier, like I don't really know what I would add in my title. This could be a good way to think about it. If one of your attributes would be a good way to make your title a little bit more relevant, feel free to kind of workshop that out. So this way you can kind of align your title and description with your details and attributes to make it a lot more consistent for SEO. And then also for categories and subcategories, you want to make sure that you're adding the most relevant subcategory. If all of your products are like wellness products, let's say, you don't want to just put it in that high level category. You want to kind of break it down a little bit further, and whether it's for skincare, whether it's for, lip balms, try to break it down a little bit further because we want to make sure that your products are being surfaced in the most relevant places. And if users are navigating to those specific categories or subcategories and you're not listing it out there specifically, you're not going to show up in that case. So again, that's a really good way to make sure that you're not overgeneralizing your specific products and you're showing up in a very relevant way. So I know we cover a lot today, and there's definitely a lot of great questions I'm already seeing come into the chat. But Sarah's now going to talk a little bit more around how we can actually take a little bit more action here using Faire tools and strategies.
Thanks so much, Zach. I hope this was a really helpful foundation. I know when Zach pitched this to me the first time, I was full of new ideas and new ways to think about how you can optimize for SEO. So now that we have this great base layer with Zach, let's talk a little bit more about specific Faire tools and strategies that you can use to go ahead and amplify this investment that is SEO and the work that you've put together. So the first is through seasonal optimization. And I've already seen quite a few questions come through where, maybe you don't have new SKUs or you don't have new things to update your actual catalog with. How can you actually still optimize for SEO when you don't have newness? So this is a really great trick, and I highly recommend as a hack to basically up level how you think about SEO. And the way you can kind of think about this is basically for many brands, this is an opportunity to go ahead and put yourself in the customer's shoes, like Zach has mentioned quite a few times here today, and think about how a customer might be using your product transitionally or season to season, month to month, and how that might change. So for instance, for example, let's say here we have this Suma Santa Fe spice blend. In the winter, it's maybe perfect for cozy chili for Super Bowl Sunday. But as we transition into summer, it's your core go-to barbecue for your spice rub for your ribs. So think about different ways that your customers might be using your product. Another good example, so let's say you're in the homewares and you have these lovely grass cloth coasters. So maybe in the winter, it becomes the way to bring the outdoors in for your holiday tablescape. But in the spring and into the summer, maybe it's the perfect addition to your al fresco dining landscape. So again, taking one product that maybe isn't changing and thinking about how it can be in different places and be transitioned through optimization of titles or tags or changes in your description or including them in a collection. And then also taking out anything that maybe is outdated or underperforming that you aren't seeing the true results from. And then let's also talk about collections. So this is a really easy tool that takes moments to set up. And what it does is in the merchandising side of your shop page, it allows for more retailers to increase their browsing and bundling and ideally spike some interest based on you tackling key themes and keywords that are trending right now. So as you can see here in this example, we've got theme day, Halloween, and things that are really popular right now that maybe those products aren't meant for that, but you're able to kind of put it together and make it feel like it echoes trending moment. So things to think about are seasonal relevance, use case, so what's the utility and how is your customer using it? Audience, so what is your buyer looking for? Who do you want this to be for? And how do you actually help frame that up really nicely? And of course, for folks that are always, for retailers, they're always thinking about their wallets. So how do you actually think about pricing tiers? So maybe it's gifts under $25, or putting a price range, et cetera, et cetera. So those are just some ways that you can go ahead and use the collection tool. And as we mentioned before, and as you all made very clear in your poll yourself, AI is here. And whether you are using it today in different contexts of your life or in your business, it is shaping how customers search today. And as you can see here, 72% of consumers are actually using these tools specifically to get product recommendations. And where they're pulling that from is a wide combination of domains, as you can see in this list here. I know it's quite small, but some things that it's really pulling for are testimonial-based references. So things that are giving reviews, advice, in addition to Instagram and socials. So those are all things that are pulling and populating into these search results when folks are using AI tools. And with that said, in the midst of the AI, I would say, growth immensely over the last year, retail websites have actually been directed from AI search tools with an increase of over 1,200%. Well, a lot of that, of course, is just the growing popularity and the ingenuity of the tool. It is really important to know and understand that this is how a lot of folks are landing into these retail sites and how for retailers are looking to shop and curate products. So I'd love to talk a little bit more about how Faire Direct kind of plays into that and how you can leverage that tool to really help optimize some of these new world phenomenons when it comes to AI and how folks are searching. So for those who are not familiar with Faire Direct, what it is, it's a built-in suite of order taking tools that you can go ahead and use anywhere with any retailer, whether or not they're on Faire or off of Faire. And this is a really great way for you to basically help capture any of those folks who are browsing in different parts of your brand experience, whether it be your website, on social, et cetera, and help point them in the right direction if they're looking for wholesale. And what's great for those who are using this tool, specifically embedding it into your website, we're able to, one, make sure that your wholesale pricing is kept sensitive for anyone who is not a wholesale buyer. So you can feel assured about that, but it also is helping to increase the authority on your brand page on Faire because we're getting a lot of the signals that we talked about before related to shop traffic. So I'd love to kind of paint a picture of how this comes to life. So here's an example. Let's say I'm a retailer in the state of Michigan looking to curate some local candles. And I would love to get a list of brands that I can go ahead and reference and research and maybe find them on Faire. So in this case, I've got my lovely list here. And if I go and click into these particular pages, I'm either get brought right to Faire, which makes it easy access for me, and I can go ahead and start buying. If I'm logged in or if I'm not on Faire, I can go ahead and register. Or if I'm driven to their website and they have the widget or an easy access Faire resource, I can go ahead and just start shopping. And I'm left with an easy experience that ideally is capturing every sale. And then if you look at this other example, in this case, for this brand, I know exactly what I want. I would love to order from this brand in particular. If I go ahead and click on their wholesale page, it actually takes me right to Faire. And that makes my experience so much easier. You already have all my information if I'm already a retailer. And I can go ahead and browse, see your product selection, understand the benefits for myself, and then go ahead and start making those purchases. So really easy ways to help drive traffic, stimulate your SEO, and help drive a little bit more attraction to your Faire shop page. And with that, I would love to introduce Kelly from the TELETIES team to speak a little bit about her experience, and really excited to give you all a firsthand glimpse as to how they're thinking about it within their team. So before we start, Kelly, so before we jump into your history, some quick facts about TELETIES for those who do not know the brand. It is a really popular hair accessories brand that has taken the world by storm with all of its options of hair clips, hair ties, and easy to use ways of getting my hair up, and I have very long hair, so I'm a big user of that. And then in terms of when they joined Faire, they joined in February 2022. They've had nearly 30,000 lifetime orders, and since joining have actually 20x their weekly sales from that February 2022 date until now. And they have over 1,000 5-star reviews, which is incredible and so impressive and so exciting to see that. So let's jump in, Kelly. Can you give me a quick where you're based and your role at TELETIES?
Yeah, absolutely. So I am based in Dallas, Texas, and like as Sarah mentioned, I am the wholesale manager here at TeleTies.
Amazing. And I think you've been in the industry for quite some time, so you know a thing or two about the wholesale industry.
Yes, I have been in retail wholesale for a little over 16 years. I always say I started when I was 3. So I've been here a long time, but I've been with TeleTies for almost 3 years now.
Perfect. And as we kind of we've spoken a lot about trends and also search, curious, 2 last questions. What is your favorite trend right now? And also, what's the last thing you searched?
Yeah, okay. Trend wise, I'm loving the fisherman core trend. Living in Dallas, Texas. We obviously don't get cold weather right away for fall. So I love the idea of wearing like a satin short with, a chunky sweater and a boot. You'll definitely catch me in that because it won't get cold in Texas for a while. And as far as last thing I searched, I'm currently in New York City right now for a market and meetings. And I'm a big foodie. So definitely any new restaurants in the city, that's definitely what I last Googled.
Love it. Love a foodie moment too. So let's talk a little bit more about how TeleTies is approaching SEO across your channels. Can you tell me a little bit more about your team's focus and how you think about their catalogs? I know you have quite a robust one for those who also have larger catalogs.
Yeah. So SEO is obviously extremely important to our business across the board, but it's going to look a little bit differently on wholesale. We definitely want to be speaking to the buyer more. We did invest in a third-party marketing company to get started and really improve our overall SEO until we became more confident here. And once we did that, we really just take cues from the Goods newsletter that comes out every month. So it's great that it shows the top 10 search terms for this month and the previous months. But that being said, we want to be really intentional about our SEO. So for example, like Western has been trending as an SEO term for, I feel like almost the whole year. Well, we don't really have anything in our product catalog that resonates with that. And that's okay. We really want to be intentional and target the right buyer. We don't want to push it if it doesn't make sense. We have an extremely large catalog. We have anywhere from 500 to 1,000 SKUs at any given time of the year. In addition to that, we also do new launches every 2 to 3 weeks. So when we do that, we have a great marketing team that goes through a checklist during every single launch. And this SEO is part of that checklist. So this is just a really good cadence for us to follow to clean up any SEO on our page across the board.
Amazing. Really helpful context, Kelly. And for those who are tuned in, we will be also sharing an SEO checklist that Zach helped us put together to make sure you all feel like you have a great resource you can go back to and check yourselves as you're adding new products or going through your catalog. So Kelly, I'd love to hear an example of how you might think about D2C and wholesale differently and how TeleTies thinks about that.
Yeah, so I think in your naming conventions, I always say like we want to be as descriptive as possible, but also as organized as possible. So I think a better example, like we think of really fun names for our products. So for example, we have a full collegiate line and license line, and we have something called Roll Tide. We have a few SKUs called Roll Tide. Well, if you're not in the SEC or familiar with college football, you probably have zero idea what that is. So we want to look into that search term and that naming convention. Okay, how can we make this a little bit more relevant to any sort of buyer buying product? Do we need to add in game day, college, Alabama, to really look how we can maximize those SKUs.
Really great example. And I think everyone can now see what you all sell. And also this is an example of your brand website. And then what you described is a really great transition of how it might show up differently in Faire. So let's talk a little bit more about tools that you use to go ahead and optimize some of these trends. Specifically, I'd love to name a trend that we're seeing, and I think everyone it's relevant for is Christmas 2025. So we're already seeing that starting to trend, and that actually has been trending since July for us on Faire. But right now, we're really starting to see so much momentum and those true spikes. how does your team think about how you approach the holiday? Like for instance, Christmas 2025.
Yeah. So again, I mean, really going back to that goods newsletter, I mean, holiday 2025, Christmas 2025 has been trending for a while. And we haven't launched our holiday 2025 line yet. So, we'll look into those trending SEO seasonal terms and think, okay, what can we do to get a head start? So, can we create a holiday 2025 collection right now? Maybe we can add in some red, some green, some older holiday SKUs to kind of give them more life. From there, we can really update all of our SEO and descriptions, naming conventions, and then that makes us super organized and sets us up for success when we do launch our holiday line.
Really great approach. And I think that it's a great nod to some of the things we just talked about is how can you actually think about it creatively, even when you don't have things that are exactly fitting that type and what makes sense for you in your catalog. So wanted to close out with just your favorite tools that maybe have like surprised you or have found to be like really influential in your strategy as it relates to like in the actual Faire platform.
Yeah. So we did recently join Faire Insider, which we were a little bit hesitant to try, but it's been really great with us, for us, especially paired back to our Faire promoted listings. We love the analytics that go along with that, as long as just other Faire analytics as well. So, the analytics on being able to see both your top sell-through items and your top return items and comparing the two are really helpful. So when you look at those top items, like what does the SEO look like? What does the product descriptions look like? What is the photography like there? And can we implement those into our top return items to, again, maximize those SKUs more and improve them? We also really love using the Faire DM tool. You cannot underestimate it. We get great responses from buyers here, and I love the auto templates we can use. Additionally, looking at your customers and being able to pull different types of segments using the Faire, all the Faire different filters that are available. And I think that, like, kind of just to wrap it up, naming conventions and the SEO descriptions, it's a lot of work, and it's definitely not easy, but overall it will make a really big difference in your business.
Incredible. I think that's a really great piece of advice to end on, Kelly, in terms of just like that investment. So thank you so much for jumping on and sharing some of your insights. I hope folks are able to run away with some ideas of how they can apply it to their own shop pages. And with that, I'll actually move into closing us out with some FAQs. Thanks so much, Kelly. And I will hand it over to Zach to just tackle these last three before we go ahead and give our thanks.
Yeah, that was awesome. It's always really great to just hear live from another brand around how they're actually doing this. But let's kind of do some of these, FAQs that we got from the audience a little quick. So in terms of how should I approach SEO if I sell a saturated category like candles or jewelry? So I think this is a really great question and a question that comes up a lot. What I would recommend here is, again, try to be as specific and long tail and relevant as possible. You're likely not just selling any type of candle or any type of jewelry. It could be a little bit more specific around the shape of the candle or the type of it or the scent, or there's definitely a lot of different modifiers there that you could be using. Same thing with jewelry, like the materials that it's made of or the shape of it, or whatever type of thing you're selling, be a little bit more specific, a little longer tail. Sarah gave some great recommendations on how to actually do some of this research to figure out how you can make this a little bit more specific, but also think about it from the attributes and the modifiers that you're using on your own listings. How can you add this to the title and the description to be a little bit more descriptive here? That's a good way to stand out. Let's see what the next one is. And the next one is, how do I optimize SEO without keyword stuffing or making my listings look very spammy? That's also a great one because, as we mentioned, you don't want to just throw like everything at it and just make it sound like a bunch of like kind of garbage in a sense. You want to make sure it sounds good and make it sound like a user. I think Kelly gave a great example of like how she actually and how their team actually, kind of analyzes what their products are and makes it sound like the customer's voice. So again, you don't, if you have a lot of modifiers and a lot of like attributes, you don't want to add every single one here so it's very spammy. You want to add the most relevant one, the one that it truly is. Again, this is where you think like a customer. And if they were looking at your product title, Would they want to click on it? Would you want to click on it? So again, you want to try to use the most relevant one in this case. And that's where we mentioned like updating your catalog. Like if you don't see some good results instantly from or as you're selling your products, if you don't see like good results from these titles, maybe that's the time to update it and change it out or make it more seasonal. I think that's a good way to kind of consistently use the most relevant things and test what works, because that's the only true way you're going to really see if you're, getting good results. But again, try to pick just like one modifier here. And then finally, how long does it take to see results from SEO changes? How can you track it? So again, that is like the big question is like, how can we typically see results? I'll speak generally from like my experience within SEO. It's obviously going to be a little different when you're like on Faire or as a brand, and depending what category you're in. But typically when I'm making a change on a website, I expect to see results ideally within like 4 to 6 weeks. So that's really when I want to see movement in that time. I want to see something doing better. It could be quicker than that. It sometimes could be a little longer than that. But the goal here is if you're not making these changes, then you're not going to be able to test and see what works and what doesn't. And again, that's really where the Faire Analytics product section comes in, where you can monitor your top performers. And that's where I think Kelly's recommendation of being organized. If you made a change, keep track of it. See what happens pre and post. And if you're seeing those, benefits. If not, it might be time to go back to the drawing board and use something else. But again, that's my general recommendation for like monitoring success there.
Amazing. Thanks so much, Zach. We'll close out with just 3 quick takeaways and a quick poll to gather your feedback. So one, we want to make sure that you have an access to all the SEO content we shared today. So you'll get a recording and the SEO checklist that you can reference back to. This is truly your foundation, so use it. Two, explore the trend resources that we have available on the blog and in other services across Faire, and keep your eyes peeled for any emails coming your way. And then lastly, utilize Faire Direct on your website and in other channels to help drive more traffic to your site and gain more visibility in the long term. And as one last note, you will be getting a webinar survey right in front of you right now, and we so appreciate all of your feedback and your thoughts to see if this was helpful. We're always striving to improve the content, and also would love to capture any content that you're seeking from us in the next coming months as we continue to take root with the webinar program that we're offering here at Faire today. But ultimately, thank you so much for all of your time. And if you have any other outstanding questions or interested in learning more about Faire Direct, feel free to tick that box in this survey, and we'll be sure to do some outreach with you all. Thank you so much.